जय राधा माधव जय कुंज बिहारी। य गोपी जनवल्लभा जय गिरिवरधारी। जय गोपी जनवल्लभा जय गिरिवरधारी। यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन। यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन। यमुनातीरावनचारि यमुनातीरावनचारि। जय राधा माधव जय कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव जय कुंज बिहारी। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, chapter 24, entitled Chanting the Song Sung by Lord Shiva, and verse 17. Sangama khalu viprarshe Shivaneha sharirinam Dullabho manayo dadyur Asankadyam abhipsitam Sangama khalu viprarshe Shivaneha sharirinam Dullabho manayo dadyur Asankadyam abhipsitam Sangama khalu viprarshe Shivaneha sharirinam Dullabho manayo dadyur Asangadyam abhipsitam. Prabhus? Sangama khalu viprarshe Shivaneha Sharirinam Dullabho Manayo Tadyur Asangadyam Abhipsitam Asangamadyam Viprashe. Ladies. Sangama Kalu Viprashe Shivanena Sarira Dullabho Manayo Tadyur Asangadyam Abhipsitam Sangama Kalu Viprashe Shivaneha Sharirinam Dullabho Manayo Tadyur Asangadyam Abhipsitam. Okay, word for word. Sangama, association. Khalu, certainly. Viprarishe, O best of the Brahmanas. Shivena, along with Lord Shiva. Iha, in this world. Sharirinam, those who are encaged in material bodies. Dullabha, very rare. Munaya, great sages. Dadhu, engage themselves in meditation. Asangat, being detached from anything else. Yam, unto who? Abhipsitam, desiring. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Ki. Translation. The great sage Vidura continued, O best of the Brahmanas, it is very difficult for living entities encaged within this material body to have personal contact with Lord Shiva. Even great sages who have no material attachments do not contact him, despite their always being absorbed in meditation to attain his personal contact. Purport. Since Lord Shiva does not incarnate himself unless there is some special reason, it is very difficult for an ordinary person to contact him. However, Lord Shiva does descend on a special occasion when he is ordered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this regard, it is stated in the Padma Purana that Lord Shiva appeared as a Brahmana in the age of Kali to preach the Mayavad philosophy, which is nothing but a type of Buddhist philosophy. It is stated in Padma Puran, Mayavadama satchastram prachannam bodham uchyate Mayevavhitam devi kalo brahmana murtina. Lord Shiva, speaking to Parvati Devi, foretold that he would spread the Mayavad philosophy in the guise of a sannyasi Brahmana, just to eradicate Buddhist philosophy. This sannyasi was Sripad Shankaracharya. In order to overcome the effects of Buddhist philosophy and spread Vedanta philosophy, Sripad Shankaracharya had to make some compromise with the Buddhist philosophy, and as such he preached the philosophy of monism, for it was required at that time. Otherwise there was no need for his preaching Mayavad philosophy. At the present moment there is no need for Mayavad philosophy or Buddhist philosophy, and Lord Chaitanya rejected both of them. This Krishna consciousness movement is spreading the philosophy of Lord Chaitanya and rejecting the philosophy of both classes of Mayavadi. Strictly speaking, both Buddhist philosophy and Shankara's philosophy are but different types of Mayavad dealing on the platform of material existence. Neither of these philosophies has spiritual significance. There is spiritual significance only after one accepts the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita, which culminates in surrendering unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Generally, people worship Lord Shiva for some material benefit, and although they cannot see him personally, they derive great material profit by worshipping him. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shiyatapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadhvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamascha He Krishna Kurana Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shurpad Ki Jai. Thank you everyone for joining, and those online also. It's a humbling service to sit here in the Durban temple to give a class. So I pray and seek the blessings that the devotees can empower me, can bless me, so that I can say something which is purifying, something which is bona fide, something which can connect us back to our roots of Krishna consciousness and Srila Prabhupada's teachings. So, just a recap of where we are in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, we're in a conversation between two great personalities, Vidura and Maitreya. And as part of this conversation, at the end of Canto 3, what we heard is that there's Lord Kapila who is speaking about Sankhya Yoga with his mother Devahuti, talking about different things. And Sankhya Yoga is this idea of breaking everything down into its constituent components, like breaking the book down into the fact that it's made of paper, and then the paper is made of wood, etc., etc. Like breaking everything down into its core components. And as part of that description of Sankhya Yoga, Kapila Dev also then talks about devotional service, and specifically breaks down devotional service in the three modes of nature: ignorance, passion, and goodness. And he does this to then establish that there's one type of devotional service which is the best of all yogas, and that is pure devotional service. That which is unmotivated, that which is uninterrupted. And then in Canto 4, because he's just described Bhakti Yoga in the modes, in Canto 4 what we hear are different pastimes about practicing Bhakti Yoga in the modes. So we started off Canto 4 talking about the pastime of Shiva and Daksha, where Daksha was an amazing devotee. He was doing all these austerities, all these sacrifices, but we know that was in the mode of ignorance, because he was using it and then having so much envy towards Shiva. And then, as we know of the pastime, Shiva then cuts his head off and replaces it with the head of a goat. And then we hear about Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj, a small, I think it's a 5-year-old boy who desires to have a kingdom bigger than Brahma. And so he goes to the forest for 6 months, practices severe austerities, and at some point he's sucking the life out of the whole entire universe, because he was performing bhakti in the mode of passion. He set out to have a kingdom bigger than Brahma, but in the end, when Vishnu appears before him, he says, "My desires were like broken pieces of glass." And then, before this chapter, we hear about the pastime of Prithu Maharaj. Prithu Maharaj, who is the Lord himself, has descended as Prithu Maharaj to show us bhakti in the mode of goodness, because he was showcasing to us what it means to be an exemplary leader. Somebody who's really looking out for the praja, for the citizens, in the mode of goodness, looking for their material well-being, their spiritual well-being. It was in the mode of goodness. And then chapter 3, the chapter just before this, we hear about Prithu Maharaj's departure and his wife, Queen Archie, I believe her name is, her departure. And then in chapter 24, what we hear about in later verses is something called the Rudragit, the song of Shiva. And the song of Shiva is glorifying, it's describing the Supreme Lord. And the verses up until now, from verse about 10 to 15 verses, we hear about the lineage of Prithu Maharaj coming to somebody called Prachina Barhi, or Barhishat, King Maharaj Barishat. And then we hear about how he has 10 sons called the Prachetas. And just before these verses, just before 1617, we hear about how he asked the 10 Prachetas to get married, to have sons, so that they can then lead the kingdom. And in verse 16, I'm just going to read it out. Vidura asks Maitreya, "My dear Brahmana, why did the Prachetas meet Lord Shiva on the way? Please tell me how the meeting happened, how Lord Shiva became very pleased with them, and how he instructed them. Certainly such talks are important, and I wish that you please be merciful upon me and describe them." When the Prachetas were asked to get married and have children, the Prachetas didn't just go, okay, that's it, time to go get married, time to enjoy sense enjoyment and have children. We see even Prabhupada encourage samskaras. We see that historically also, even throughout the Bhagavatam, we see like the sons of Daksha. Before they went onto that journey of service, they went on that journey of sacrifice. So the Prachetas, it said that they went for 10,000-year sacrifice of austerity, of penance, for 10,000 years. And they were planning to do it underwater. But as they were arriving at the water, at the side of the water, that's where Shiva came and gave his darshan. Because Shiva is somebody who is very pleased by somebody looking to meditate on the Supreme Lord. And that's what the Prachetas were doing. In order to perform their service, they started off by performing their sacrifice to get the benedictions, to get the piety, to get the blessings to perform their service. And then in verse 17, which is the verse of today, the great sage Vidura continued, "O best of the Brahmanas, it is very difficult for living entities encaged within this material body to have personal contact with Lord Shiva. Even great sages who have no material attachments do not contact him, despite their always being absorbed in meditation to attain his personal contact." So here we see that Vidura is very much glorifying Shiva's position and glorifying the Prachetas for being of a caliber where Shiva himself came to give his mercy. And in the purport, we see Srila Prabhupada talks about Shiva, how he's always doing what is ordered by the Lord. But then Srila Prabhupada also talks about Adi Shankaracharya and his Mayavad philosophy. So I thought we'd chant that a bit. So who is Lord Shiva? Because that's the first question we should think. We should understand the personalities that we're talking about. Who is Lord Shiva? Well, from the Brahma Samhita, we understand that there's the analogy of the butter and yogurt or curd. Shishi Radhanath, Shishi Gaur Hari Ki Jai. So when we think of Lord Shiva, from the Brahma Samhita, we understand that there's the analogy of the milk and the yogurt or curd, where Lord Vishnu is described as the milk, as the source. But then as soon as he adds something acidic, something to, in quotes, taint the milk, then it becomes yogurt or curd. In the same way, it's described that when Vishnu comes in contact with the material energy, then that tainting, that tinge of material energy makes Vishnu become Shiva. Just as milk becomes yogurt or curd when it's in contact with acid, Vishnu becomes Shiva. So Shiva's position is very, very unique because we can't say he's Vishnu Tattva, we can't say that he's a manifestation of Vishnu because he's not entirely transcendental. And we can't say that he's entirely material like Jiva Tattva, like one of us, because he's got the qualities and the attributes of Vishnu. So Shiva has his own Tattva, Shiva Tattva, which is in between the Jiva Tattva and the Vishnu Tattva. In between because he's not fully transcendental and he's not fully material. But then also in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in Canto, I believe it's 11 or 12, we hear of Vaishnavanam Yatha Shambhu. We heard that of all Vaishnavas, Shiva is the topmost. Because he's an amazing, a very strong, a very elevated devotee that even we as Vaishnavas, Gaudiya Vaishnavas, when we go to Vrindavan, when we celebrate different festivals, oftentimes we'll see that we do worship Shiva, not as the Supreme Lord, but as the greatest devotee who can give us access to Krishna. And then to add to Shiva's glories, we hear in every Leela that Krishna has had, in whether it's Gaur Leela, Ram Leela, Krishna Leela, Shiva's presence, Shiva manifests himself in a very important role. When we look at Ram Leela, he manifests himself as Lord Hanuman, to exemplify, to personify devotion and dedication. For those who know Ramayana or know Canto 9, the pastimes from Canto 9, we see how Hanuman was so dedicated to doing anything and everything for the service of Lord Ram. Then in Krishna Leela, there's different manifestations that Shiva has, but the most prominent one that most of us will know about is Gopishwar Mahadev, where Lord Shiva himself wanted to get access to the rasa dance of Krishna. But because he was in a male body, Vrinda Devi was like, you're not allowed. You're not allowed entrance because the only male allowed is Krishna. And so if you want access to the Rasa Leela, to even witness it, you need to take a dip in the Yamuna and then come out as a female gopi. And Shiva's love and devotion was such that he did exactly that. He dipped into the Yamuna, came out as Gopishwar Mahadev so he could get entrance into the Rasa Leela. And then when we consider Gaura Leela, the reason why Mahaprabhu came is because of a partial manifestation of Lord Shiva, Advaita Acharya. So Advaita Acharya came, Lord Shiva manifest a partial manifestation of himself just to give us, or give the Kali Yuga people access to the Yuga Dharma in a prominent way, the Nam Sankirtan in a prominent way. So we see Lord Shiva is a very great personality, a great Vaishnava, a great manifestation of the Lord. And even though Lord Shiva is always depicted with ash all over his body and face, living in a crematorium, surrounded by ghouls and goblins, he's showcasing through all of that his complete detachment from all material things. As Srila Prabhupada would say, simple living, high thinking. How simple can you get than not caring about your external environment or anything? And yet he's always meditating on the Supreme Lord. We see, whenever we see a pose of Shiva, even in standard Sanatana Dharma temples, you see Shiva's always in meditation because he's meditating on the Supreme Lord. And so whenever he's come to give us some sort of access to the Supreme Lord. In Hanuman form, to access the devotional mood. In Gopishwar Mahadev form, to access the desire to always connect with Krishna. In Gaura Leela Advaita Acharya form, access the mercy that the Lord can bestow. But then he manifests as Adi Shankaracharya. And as the Padma Puran says, and as Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, to give Mayavad philosophy. In some purports and some lectures, Srila Prabhupada describes Mayavad philosophy as spiritual suicide. Shiva came to give us spiritual suicide. How do we understand that? How can Shiva, who comes to give us all these special ways to connect with the Lord, come to distract us from our spiritual life? Well, for that we have to understand the Vedic theology and how it's progressed over time. So when we look at the departure of Krishna 5,000 plus years ago, we know that after Krishna departed, what manifested in the world? Kali Yuga, the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. And when that happened, then there was degradation in the way the Vedic society was functioning. Before, there was a lot of love, a lot of devotion in different forms of worship. But as Kali Yuga started to manifest, the very same Vedic scriptures started to be used in material, ritualistic ways to improve one's material situation. Because the idea of bhakti, the idea of spiritual connection, was starting to slowly get lost. And as that was happening, one of the most prominent things that started to evolve is violence, and especially violence towards animals. Animal sacrifice, killing animals in the name of animal sacrifice, but to satisfy the tongue. And so what we see is that some time later, I forgot what, I think it's 500 years before Christ, or BC, then we see that Lord Buddha manifests. The Lord himself descends as Lord Buddha. And as Lord Buddha, he basically says, okay, the root of all of this, all of these issues, is a misappropriation or the misuse of the Vedic literature. If somebody is misusing something, what do? Generally, you take it away from them. And so that's what Lord Buddha did. He said, okay, you don't know how to use the Vedic literature to make progress in your spiritual life. Let's just take it away so that you can live a human life, a civilized human life. So Lord Buddha's philosophy, whilst it's Mayavad, it was necessary at the time in order to stop the misuse of the Vedic literature. And so what was his role? Lord Buddha's role was be pious human beings and practice ahimsa, non-violence. Then some 1200 years later, Shankaracharya comes and says, okay, it's very nice that everybody is pious, that everybody is practicing non-violence. But how about let's take it a step further. Let's now bring in the scriptures again so that one can connect with the source of all knowledge, the scriptures. And I think we all have experience where somebody tells us something very, very high philosophy, very, very deep esoteric stuff, and it goes over our head. And so Lord Shankara couldn't give us the direct access to bhakti at the time because they were just very much focused on living a very human life. So what Shankaracharya was doing was, okay, we're all individuals, we're all living a human life. Let's connect with something that's going to unite us all, which is this idea of monism, this idea of connecting with Vedic literature in a way that will connect us to thinking of something higher, where we're all part of the same unit, the Brahman. And then we see, I think it's Ramanujacharya next. And then we see that as the Vedic philosophy progresses, or the theology progresses, then Ramanujacharya comes, and he then establishes this idea of personism, this idea that yes, we're all part of one unit, Brahman, but Brahman has its own attributes. There's the Jiva attribute of Brahman, there's the material aspect of Brahman, and there's the Supreme Lord aspect of the Brahman. Then Madhvacharya comes and says, okay, you're connecting with Brahman, you're connecting with this idea that there's differences, but actually, we're all different. The Jiva is different, Supreme Lord is different, material energy is different. So then now he's separated everything out. Now as we see the theology progresses, we see that in each evolution there's still something incomplete. When Shankaracharya was there, the idea that God is a person was incomplete. When Ramanujacharya was there, the idea that we're all distinct was missing. And with Madhvacharya, the idea that there's relationships, there's this idea of worshipping the Supreme Lord as a person was also missing. And so what we see is that Mahaprabhu, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, comes to then harmonize all these different schools of thoughts. Because they're not incorrect, they're incomplete. I remember a while ago watching a video of a teacher in school. And this teacher wanted to explain this idea of different perspectives, different thought processes. And I don't know what sort of material it was, but what he had done is he had a long table, and in the middle of the table he put a ball. It's just a round ball, like almost a football-sized ball. And he asked two students to come up on either side of the table, not look at the ball or anything. And then on one side of the ball, he had a light that was shining on the ball. So half of the ball was illuminated with light. And then he asked the two students, what color is the ball? The one on this side said it's black. The one on the other side said that it's like a chrome blue, chrome green sort of color. They couldn't see the other side of the ball. So all they could see is, this side could only see that it's just fully black. There's no way the ball is, any other color, it's just black. And the other side was seeing, okay, it's actually not black. The other guy's gone cuckoo, he's gone crazy. It's actually blue, green, whatever color it was. And so then it's like, confused, right? Perspectives, confused. How is he seeing the same thing that I'm seeing, but it's totally different? So then what the teacher did was, okay, don't look at the table, just rotate around and look from the other perspective. Just stand from the other perspective. So they did that. Then they looked at the ball again. And then he asked the question, what color is the ball? The person who was saying black whilst he was standing this side is now saying it's blue or green. And the person who was saying blue or green on this side is now saying it's black. Because they now have a different perspective of that same truth. They're now seeing it from a different angle. So all of these acharyas that we talk about, like Shankaracharya, Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, they're given different schools of thought on the same Vedic literature because they're coming at it from different perspectives, different angles of looking at the same scripture. And so what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did was, he picked up the ball, rotated it around in all these different angles, so then he can see, okay, you're right, you're right, you're right, you all are right, and therefore none of you are wrong, but the philosophy that unites all of you is this achintya bheda bheda tattva. Is this idea of being simultaneously one and different. Is this idea that we are similar or the same as the Lord in quality, but different in quantity. And we see Mahaprabhu rejected Mayavad philosophy, he rejected all these philosophies to establish a complete philosophy which unites all of these different perspectives. Sometimes we see out of our own ignorance, we look at Adi Shankaracharya, we look at the Mayavad philosophy and say, oh, Adi Shankaracharya is a Mayavadi. Reject him. But when we understand how the theology, how the philosophy has evolved over time, we actually understand that Shankaracharya had a purpose in the divine strategy and the divine plan of the Lord to progress society in a way to make the soil ready for bhakti to be established through Mahaprabhu. And when we look at the inner world of Adi Shankaracharya, then we actually see that even though his philosophy is that of Mayavad, even though his philosophy is that of materialism and this idea of oneness, we see that he's actually a great devotee. He's Shiva himself. How can he not be a great devotee? One very famous ashtakam that we sing on Rath Yatra usually, Jagannath Ashtakam, was given by Adi Shankaracharya. And then my favorite, just because my name's there, Bhaja Govindam. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhajamudmate, Samprapte Sanite Kale, Nahi Nahi Rakshati Dukrinkarane. The same Adi Shankaracharya that came to give us Mayavad philosophy in this Bhaja Govindam prayer or stotra, the very first stanza he says, just worship Govinda, just worship Govinda, just worship Govinda. Your grammatical knowledge and word jugglery will not save you at the time of death. So even though the philosophy that he gave to the world was that of Mayavad, the inner world was that of devotion. And so we can take this as a point for us to meditate on and to think about when we meet devotees, when we meet sadhus, that externally seem like, what are they doing? How is that Prabhu, I don't know, standing on the altar without having bathed or anything like that? Just as an example. But what we can see is that there's the external presentation, but then there's the internal devotion. Sometimes the Lord himself comes, like as Lord Buddha, or sends an agent, like Lord Shiva in the form of Shankaracharya, where externally it seems like they're going against the grain of what the Lord wanted, but their service is exactly that. Because they're taking the people on a journey to connect to Krishna in a deeper way as part of their journey. Whilst I was in Guru Puja, I was just looking at the paintings and pictures again. And isn't that exactly what Bhishma Dev's service was? On the battlefield of Kurukshetra, people can look at Bhishma Dev and say, oh, he's an enemy of Krishna. He was fighting against Krishna and the Pandavas. But just look at that picture. When Krishna's coming to kill him, fully surrendered. You do whatever you want. I've done my service. You can do whatever you want. Because that was his mood. That was his rasa. That was his service to oppose Krishna. Of course, there's the deeper thing about, their loving exchange was that of virya, of that of fighting. But even just the external presentation, Bhishma apparently is a non-devotee. Apparently, he's somebody envious of Krishna and the Pandavas, but that was his service. And so, when we look at devotees, when we look at the sadhus, the pure devotees who give us access to Krishna, sometimes we won't even recognize that they're giving us access to Krishna by what they're saying to us, but how they're communicating with us, how they're interacting with us. I was thinking on the way back from Soweto Rath Yatra, in the car, some of us were talking about a great personality, His Holiness Govindam Maharaj, and how he would deal with people on a very human level. One might look at him and go, oh, he's just being a normal person. He's just a normal person like one of us. But when we look at how he has connected with people, he might not have spoken about the highest philosophy, the highest truth of Krishna, and the depth of pure devotional service to the people he's spoken to. But somehow or another, he's caught on to what that person needs right now in their spiritual life, in their spiritual journey, and connecting them to something that will progress them in their journey. And isn't that exactly what the evolution of theology is? Buddha came to stop Vedic literatures being misused. Shankaracharya came to reconnect people to the Vedic literature. Like this, the pure devotees come not necessarily to give us the highest truth in that same package, but to package it in a way that is relevant and applicable to us in our current time, place, circumstance, and situation. Because if I was sitting here, and I'm not saying I'm even qualified to do this, but if I started speaking about the inner world, the esoteric world of Krishna Leela, how many of us will be able to connect with it? We might like it, but is that because we're connecting with Krishna, or because it's agitating our senses in terms of how enjoyable it is? And that's why recognizing that the pure devotees don't necessarily come to give the highest philosophy, but they come to give us the philosophy and packaged in a way that is applicable to us. That is the sign of somebody who's very advanced. Somebody who is connected with the source of Krishna. Because Krishna comes to reestablish dharma, to really make sure that we can take our spiritual journey seriously. And what other example do we need to look at other than Srila Prabhupada? Mahaprabhu came to give us the philosophy of Achinta Bheda Bheda Tattva. He spread, CB we read about he spread the holy name throughout all of India. How he's shown us the journey of a devotee from externally being a very strong scholar, etc., to then being completely in love with the Lord. And Prabhupada gave us access to that by keeping and preserving the principles of the highest truth. He then looked at our time, place, circumstance and said, okay, these are the principles you must live by, and this is the journey for you to take to get to the highest truth. Sometimes, and it actually, and I know many senior devotees that I've spoken to, it pains their heart also. Sometimes we hear devotees talk about how Prabhupada didn't give us everything. Anybody heard that from people before? That Prabhupada didn't give us everything? I don't know if he gave us everything. But what I do know is that Prabhupada gave us exactly what we needed and need for our spiritual journey to progress. Because he didn't exactly talk about the inner depths, the inner world of Krishna in esoteric ways, at least not from my understanding. But he gave us the journey. He gave us exactly what the Lord wanted, which is in our time, our place, our circumstance, to identify what is it that we're struggling with and to give us the next step from there to get onto the spiritual journey. And isn't that exactly what we do when we go out on the streets with book distribution with Harinam? We don't give them, we know it's the 9th offense to the holy name to, explain the depths of what the meaning of the mantra is to one who doesn't understand, to one who doesn't have faith. Yet on the streets, we tell people, chant Hare Krishna. But we package it as mantra meditation. We package it as it will help our consciousness, it will free the mind, and all these different ways that we have. We're following in that parampara that we don't give the highest thing to one who's not ready for it. We give what they're ready for. And so I don't know. I'm not going to be sitting here and have that controversial conversation of, did Prabhupada give us everything? But what I do know is that Prabhupada gave us exactly what at least I need for my spiritual journey to progress. Because as I go through the purports, and people have different apps, right? The Veda-based app, the Gita-based reader app. So I have the Gita-based reader app. And every day there's sometimes a notification that comes up with just a verse that comes up as a notification. And my gosh, it's so amazing how somehow or another the verse or the purport is relevant to me in my situation right now. And many devotees have that experience where they're struggling in life. They randomly open the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhagavad Gita. And then somehow that verse speaks to them in that situation. Because Prabhupada and Krishna have given us what is relevant to us at this moment in time. And so when Prabhupada in the purport talks about how this Krishna consciousness movement is spreading the philosophy of Lord Chaitanya and rejecting the philosophy of both classes of Mayavadi. Strictly speaking, both Buddhist philosophy and Shankara's philosophy are but different types of Mayavadi dealing on the platform of material existence. When he says, neither of these philosophies has spiritual significance. There's spiritual significance only after one accepts the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita, which culminates in surrendering unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then we understand that Srila Prabhupada, Mahaprabhu, they're rejecting the Mayavad philosophy because, number one, that's not the highest truth. The highest truth, as we understand from the Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Dharma Prityaja Mamikam Sharanam Vraja Aham Sarva Papibhyo Mokshai Shimashuchaha. This idea of surrendering, this idea of giving ourselves to the Lord, to Krishna, is the highest conclusion of the Vedic literature which Mahaprabhu gives us. Not only is that the reason, but the other reason is that our Kali Yuga brains don't have the capacity to churn all of these different philosophies and come to the conclusion ourselves. So when Mahaprabhu has come to harmonize and synthesize all these different schools of thought, whilst giving us the essence, and the Vedic literature itself talks about how the Bhagavad Gita is the essence also, then our role is to accept it. Our role is to hear it, understand it, practice it, experience it, apply it, so that we can then live it. Because Mahaprabhu came to give us love of Godhead. Which other incarnation, which other manifestation of the Lord has done that? None. Krishna comes to say, surrender unto me. But Mahaprabhu comes to show us how to surrender unto him. Because he's pulled all the philosophies together and said, they're not incorrect, they're incomplete. And because they're incomplete, as Kali Yuga brains, let's not mess with them, let's not meddle with them, let's not get involved with them. Let's get involved with the mature fruit of all of those schools of thought, the ripened fruit of all the Vedic literature, which is in the Yuga Dharma form, Harinam Sankirtan. So, and then, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Shubhapad ki jai. Questions, comments, corrections, chastisements?
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Bhaja Govindam Prabhu, for a beautiful class. It was so well thought out. I'm thinking about the word, about relevance, and I put it down before you mentioned it, but Krishna has this leeway, right? I mean, leeway is not the right word, but he, as God, he can see, he looks at the person, he knows where they're at, and then he, in some sense, sacrifices the absolute truth to be relevant to where they're at, in essence of what you're saying. But for us, we may see people and we can see that they may not connect at this point to the absolute truth. And then we have the challenge of being relevant whilst being authentic. And how do we juggle that challenge? Because we always have like East and West, and different schools of thought. It's like, we're going to self-developmental then, but we have to be relevant. And so the pull between relevance and authenticity.
Very nice question about how do we balance being authentic and relevant. As what comes to mind is what Srila Prabhupada did was preserve the principles and adapted the details. And we see the acharyas do that. The reason why we say that Srila Prabhupada is bona fide in his lineage is not because he said absolutely everything that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said. It's because he understood the mood, he understood the principles that he was taught, preserved those in his teachings, but then adapted the details according to time, place, circumstance. I think that's what we need to learn. We need to learn to understand from the scriptures what are the principles. We know, like if I go very simply, is chanting Hare Krishna a principle or a detail? We know it's a principle. Is coming to the temple a principle or a detail? That might be a hard one, but you're saying detail. And I'd probably agree. Why? Because we see there's bhakti centers, we see there's yoga centers. Srila Prabhupada didn't establish temples as the first thing. He established kirtan as the first thing. And all these different things. So we can go through like trying to understand what the principles and the details are. And I personally would fall in the trap of using my mind to try and understand things. But something Srila Prabhupada has given us, which is very, very helpful, is he's given us 3 things to look at. Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. From the scriptures, we may understand, okay, maybe this is a principle, but we could always get that vetted with Guru and Sadhu. I'm thinking that I want to do this program, and I'm going to do these 5 different things. Is this according to the principles, or is it not? You see, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, arguably you could say he broke the principle because he would feed meat, right? We know he would go to like the governments, etc., and he'd actually get his servants to serve meat. Did he break a principle or did he break a detail? Or was it just detail? Well, for us, Prabhupada established no meat. So it's a principle for us. And I'm not saying or encouraging or inspiring anyone to say, let's start serving meat to people. But you can see that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did that at his time because at that time it was necessary for him to connect them to Krishna in some way. But in our time, we've got all these alternatives to meat. That's like, do we need to feed meat? No. We just need to make prashadam so tasty that nobody wants to turn to meat. Anyway, long-winded explanation, but this idea of preserving the principles and adapting the details, which is supported by Guru Sadhu Shastra. Always having somebody senior that we can bounce off of, I think, has been wonderful. Anyone else?
Hare Krishna. We see that maybe you can shed some light on this. That Lord Buddha came and he taught Voidism, and Adi Shankaracharya, he went in monism, and then we see that Ramanujacharya was dualism, and Mahaprabhu, he encompassed everything. So maybe you can shed some light on that.
Sorry?
Maybe you can shed some light on that.
In terms of?
In terms of how the theology has progressed, basically.
Yes, that's something I touched on in class also. So in terms of the evolution of theology itself, it is that. So as Krishna left, then Vedic understanding, the way to use Vedic scriptures for spiritual purposes decreased. So Buddha came to said, okay, let's not touch the Vedic scriptures because it's being misused. So then he just established piety and non-violence. And then after that, Shankaracharya comes to reconnect everybody to the Vedic literatures. And then from there until Mahaprabhu is basically different schools of thoughts to expand on connecting to the Vedic literature, so that when Mahaprabhu comes, he can then create the complete picture of the different schools of thoughts by connecting all of them in a complete form. So just a cut down version. And what we see is that this is all, the whole evolution of theology is all the plan, it's all part of the divine strategy to then allow the complete picture to come through Mahaprabhu. Any other questions, comments? Others, I'm told that the cooks are going to be very angry at me. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Srimad Bhagavatam ki.